Hi, I'm Kevine Boggess, the president of the San Francisco Unified Board of Education.
And hi, I'm Matt Wayne. I'm the superintendent of the San Francisco Unified School District.
Superintendent, in November, we launched a state of emergency for our Empower payroll system. Do you think you could give an update on what's been done and kind of the status of where we're at in handling that emergency?
Sure. We declared the state of emergency because we knew we needed to take urgent action to address this issue. And since then, most importantly, we've established our corrective action plan that lays out what we need to do to address the issues. And then we also put together a command center, reassigning SFUSD staff to work on both fixing the issues and addressing the concerns that already existed. And so, for example, at the command center, we have a case management team that has been working to address all the tickets we've received. When we declared the state of emergency, there were over 10,000 tickets we had with people with issues and concerns. We've cut that in half at this point, but I want to be very clear that we've made progress, but it's not enough. And I still get emails every day from staff who are frustrated because they haven't had their question answered or something's inaccurate in their paycheck. And so we need to continue at this pace to be able to resolve all the issues that exist with the system.
Dr. Wynn, if you could share a little bit about what you feel like you've learned the last 4 months as we've been navigating this crisis as a district and what you kind of want to reflect back as lessons learned.
Yeah, we talk about this as we're dealing with our payroll system and the implementation of our payroll system, but what I've really learned in these past 4 months, it's our overall business and human resources operations that we need to shore up and address. One thing is when we switched over to the new system, we did not have the staffing in place to make sure it was a successful implementation. And then as we started the command center, we saw how valuable it's been to have staff from business services, from technology, from human resources in the same room working together. But that hadn't been how we were working as a district before that. And so those are just a few lessons learned that will both help us get out of this situation, but make sure moving forward we have the communication and coordination in place to achieve operational excellence, which is really where we need to go. We need to be a district where people can count on us delivering on operations so we can focus on education.
Could you talk a little bit about the impact that staffing is playing on our ability to kind of meet the challenge of this crisis and do everything that we need?
So we hear often about the teacher shortage, right? We know we're facing a crisis in bringing teachers into the classroom. In the operations area, we're facing similar shortages, and what's difficult is finding people with particular areas of expertise. And so we're talking about a payroll implementation that uses the SAP software. So finding people with background in that, when we're also competing with the city and with technology companies, it's been challenging to get staffing in. We've been able to find temporary support, but ultimately we need to build up our own team so we have the people in place to deliver on successful operations.
If I had a time machine and you had the ability to kind of go back to the beginning of kind of the Empower rollout implementation, what would you do different to kind of like ensure that we don't end up in a crisis situation?
Yeah, so not having been here, but having been through previous implementations, there's a few things I definitely would have done differently. I think what we need to remember is the district was in the middle of a pandemic and dealing with that, and maybe would have just said, while we have an antiquated system, maybe we need to slow down and wait till we resolve, work through what we're dealing with the pandemic before shifting to a new system. Secondly, I think there definitely needed to have been much more testing of the system, and so that we could see the errors before we went live, rather than do what happened is go live and then all these errors come up and they're really impacting our employees. And that's not the time we want to find out that groups of people aren't getting paid. You want to find out that in a testing phase, and that wasn't done to the depth that was needed before launching the system. So I think a lot could be done differently. Those are two key pieces I'd highlight.
The next question I had for you is, what would you say to people who don't have confidence in you or the district to resolve the issue and think that we should resort to a simpler solution like returning to our old payroll system or things to that effect?
I think for it's so tempting to say, let's just go back to what we were doing before. Maybe after the first month or two, that might have been possible. But after a year of this new system, it will be as much work, if not more, to try to go back than it will be to stabilize it. And then, I understand the lack of confidence. It's been, when I say it's been a year, that's 363 days too many of having problems at the magnitude that we're having. What I hope people see is different, and what we're trying to do, and what's important to me under my leadership, is that we're transparent and we're communicating about our progress and about where we're not making progress and what people can expect in the short term as we're working to resolve these issues, and not making promises that we can't keep around when this is going to be fixed, or that everything's going to be okay when there's not real evidence that that's the case yet.
No, thank you for that. I think that's really helpful context. I guess the next question building off of that is, when do you see us kind of being out of the woods on this issue, kind of it being resolved, and kind of what are the signs people can kind of use to tell that we're making progress to kind of get there?
That's the question everybody asks, and to some extent it's maddening not to hear an answer, and it's very frustrating for me to not give an answer. And that's why I don't want to put out an answer that and a promise that we can't deliver on. But I also don't want to hide behind that and just say, we're making progress, we'll let you know. And so what we've done is we've established some milestones to achieve over the next 90 days, which is critical. And that's reducing the number of tickets we have to show we've really made progress in addressing employees' concerns. It's about identifying and starting the fix for all the root causes, so all the underlying issues, so we're not always being reactive, but can actually, to individual employee cases, but can fix what's behind that. And then third, getting the staffing in place that we need to resolve these issues. So you should be hearing me report on those, and I am reporting on those at each of our board meetings, and that's what the public should be looking for as well, seeing progress in those three areas. And if we're not making progress, hearing why and what we're doing to address that.
Thank you, Dr. Wayne, for this conversation. Are there any other things you want to kind of share before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just want to share, I'm an educator at heart. I came to this profession and this position to want to help our students succeed and have opportunities beyond SFUSD. And I know coming into this profession that for all of our educators and all of our staff who are here, they're doing it as a labor of love and because they care for our kids. And we know as a system, just overall, we don't invest in education like we should. And we, as a society, don't value our educators and our staff in the way we should. And so then knowing that, and then to know that they have to worry about getting paid on time and accurately, is just so frustrating, because I want them focused on what's happening at our schools and in the classroom and on the kids. And so that's what's been really difficult about this process. But for me, it is also why I know we have to get this right and have to stay focused on this because we have to make sure that we then ultimately get to our goals around student learning, because that's why we're here, for the kids. But right now it doesn't feel like that if we're not taking care of those who take care of our kids, and if we're not doing right by them.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Wayne, and thank you so much for participating in this conversation with us. Hopefully it provided you a little bit more clarity and transparency on what we're doing as a district and how we're approaching our payroll crisis. Thank you so much.